Hello and welcome to the disturbing subject of ageism. It's important to get this subject out there as soon as possible because it has a huge impact on how laws are applied, how policies are applied. We need to know this stuff and have it in our head. So when evaluating practices and laws, it's important to keep in mind that ageism might have an impact on how those practices and laws are created and applied to older people. There are many kinds of ageism, and in later videos I will talk about specific examples and different kinds of people and how they experience ageism. For this video, we're just looking at ageism in a more general sense, some definitions. And then the warning, the information provided in this video is not legal advice. It is relayed for the purposes of general information. No legal decision should be made based on this material. Any viewer who needs legal advice should contact a lawyer. So what is ageism? This is taken from the website of the World Health Organization. Ageism refers to the stereotypes, how we think, prejudice, how we feel, and discrimination, how we act towards others or oneself based on age. And so notice this definition doesn't specify that ageism is directed towards older people only. That's usually what people think when they hear the term, but there's also ageism against younger people. And think about it. So we have different generations and we're all fighting and nobody really likes each other. Also, as I mentioned in an earlier video, an older generation thinking they're awesome, younger generation is terrible, literally ancient. Go back thousands of years, you can see quotes, famous people bashing younger people. It is not helpful. So while this channel will be addressing ageism towards older people, it's important to accept as part of the context that there's ageism directed to a bunch. Again, from the World Health Organization website, who does ageism affect? Ageism affects everyone. Children as young as 4 years old become aware of their culture's aged stereotypes. From that age onwards, they internalize and use these stereotypes to guide their feelings and behavior towards people of different ages. They also draw on culture's age stereotypes to perceive and understand themselves, which can result in self-directed ageism at any age. Ageism intersects and exacerbates other forms of disadvantage, including those related to sex, race, and disability. So this latter sentence touches on the concept of intersectionality. Individuals are not a member of one group and one group only, and the different groups will have an impact on the individual. For example, the experience of a white cisgendered heterosexual woman born in Canada will have significant differences from those of an LGBTQ man of color who immigrated to Canada. And we will be discussing intersectionality in later videos. A source of protection from ageism is found in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I have the whole citation up there for you. Don't need to worry about the rest of it. Equality rights come under Section 15, subsection 1. Every individual is equal before and under the law and has the right to the equal protection and equal benefit of the law without discrimination and, in particular, without discrimination based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or mental or physical disability. Now, these are called grounds. Can't be discriminated based on one of these grounds. And this particular list is referred to as enumerated grounds. There have been additions to this list by judges, and I'm going to show you what those are. But if you go to any official text of the charter, this is what you're going to see. Okay, so again, I'm showing you subsection 1. Now I'm showing you at the bottom the additions to the grounds that have been applied by judges. So that is citizenship, sexual orientation, marital status, and aboriginality residence. And they might add more. And the thing is, just because it's not written in the original text doesn't mean it is not as binding. Now, I need to clear up something. A lot of people think the charter applies to every situation. So not just government, but private enterprise or somebody kicking off someone off their Facebook page. No, it only applies to government-related activities. So maybe a government agency or another agency working on the government's behalf. So there are limits. Now we're going to bump up to the first section of the charter because this is an unfortunately poorly drafted section for what it's meant to accomplish, but it is casually known as the Reasonable Limits Clause. So here's the section. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it, subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law and as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. So what is that saying? It's saying we are a community and we have different needs and different values, and so we all have to get along. And no right is unlimited. There are always lines. So the fight is where the lines are. But for example, there's no such thing as unlimited freedom of speech, right? So we have defamation laws. You can't just say anything about anyone. It might damage their reputation, their finances. Hate speech laws. Hate speech laws protect people's lives because we know when hate speech is promoted, it can result in violence. So the thing to keep in mind, no right is unlimited. Another source of protection from discrimination is the Human Rights Code. This is the Ontario version. And here we have, referring to services, Section 1. Every person has a right to equal treatment with respect to services, goods, and facilities, without discrimination because of race, ancestry, place of origin, color, ethnic origin, citizenship, creed, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, age, marital status, family status, or disability. Now, the Human Rights Code applies to many other areas than the Charter. And let's say you had a job with the government, the Human Rights Code still applies to you in your protection for employment. Now, there are still some places where it doesn't. So again, if you get kicked off someone's Facebook page, that's not a violation of the Human Rights Code, just so you know. Now, I have squeezed in the grounds from the Charter just so you can see there's a bit of a difference with the list. One is the addition to other grounds. So marital status, family status. Why are they there? Don't know. You'd have to talk to the politicians about that. But one difference between the Charter and the Human Rights Code, the Charter is part of the Constitution. You can't just willy-nilly change the wording in it. That takes a whole other process, where the Human Rights Code is a regular statute. So it's possible for the government to just, have a vote. We want to change the language. That's cool. But why do you think there are differences? And do you think there are other additions that need to be made? Another section from the Human Rights Code about accommodation. So, Section 2, subsection 1. Everyone has a right to equal treatment with respect to the occupancy of accommodation without discrimination because of race, ancestry, place of origin, color, ethnic origin, citizenship, creed, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, age, marital status, family status, disability, or receipt of public assistance. Now, first of all, this section is more about living somewhere. There are different sections for like employment. Now, I bolded at the bottom, or the receipt of public assistance. Now, this could refer to people renting apartments and what a landlord is allowed to look at making decisions about taking someone in as a tenant. And so they're not supposed to be looking at where their income is coming from. So there are landlords who do not want to rent to people who might be on some kind of social assistance or a pension that isn't going to go up with cost of living. So they might end up with a tenant who can't pay. But they're not supposed to look into that. It's a violation of the Human Rights Code for them to say, nope, I don't want someone who is on the Ontario Disability Support Program, for example. So that's why that's there. I'm going to briefly touch on another kind of accommodation, which is if someone has particular needs, what is the other party expected to do to make services, housing, employment, for examples, accessible to that person who has needs, and what are the limits? So Will accommodation cause such disruption to the organization that it isn't just to demand that accommodation, right? So services, will accommodation endanger employees? That's just an example. So in the beginning of COVID, we didn't have a vaccine, we didn't have a treatment, and there were a bunch of people who were laid off, but some people who were deemed essential workers and didn't have the option of being laid off or otherwise getting some kind of financial support. So think about the cashiers. They're working in this environment. It's a dangerous environment for them. So we also have people who might legitimately be incapable of wearing a mask. We need to balance between the two. We might not be able to have the perfect accommodation for people who can't wear masks because we also have to balance this with the danger to employees who are, at least as a cashier, entitled to a safe environment. Housing, will making a building more accessible result in enormous expense or destruction of the building? So again, this is an example. I live in a fairly old building made before the regulations were in place. It doesn't have an elevator. It has a staircase that I wouldn't want to navigate using a cane or any other mobility device. But if the landlord were required to replace the staircase with an elevator, it would basically destroy the building. The building isn't big enough and the building can't be used really in any function, never mind rental accommodation. And then an example from employment. Will accommodating one employee endanger or result in the constructive dismissal of another? So in danger, will accommodating one employee actually threaten the safety of another? Or accommodating one employee means basically changing the nature of a job of another employee. And that last bit is full of discussion in court decisions. Where should that line be? And so just like under the Charter, we have the reasonable limits clause. Under the Human Rights Code, we have not to the point of undue hardship. And whether something is undue hardship depends very much on the context. So what can ageism look like? Well, again, this is just a general look. We're going to go into more detail in other videos, but it includes derogatory comments like senior moments. Oh, I've forgotten something, and anyone can forget things. Anyway, dinosaur. Silver tsunami. Silver tsunami is not a term used very much now, but it was used for a very long time. So equating older people with natural disasters. When an older person makes a mistake or a bad decision, it might be assumed to be signs of dementia. So if a younger person makes a really bad financial decision, it's just a stupid decision. When an older person does it, well, might be a sign that they're slipping. And then policies that ignore the needs of older people. Infantilizing, taking over making decisions while the older person still has capacity, talking down to an older person as if they were a child. Assuming health issues are a sign of aging and therefore no treatment is provided. The assumption that older people are resistant to change, and that can show up in a lot of ways, like resistant to taking on new training at work or trying new forms of health practices like more exercise, things like that. This is an article and the link is in the description. You can find it online. It's kind of old because it was first presented in 2016, but a lot of the ideas are still relevant. Although many have been aware of the growing number of older people as part of the overall population, little has been done to address this shift in demographics. Older people are often treated as a drain on resources such as healthcare and various forms of social assistance, including pensions. They are seen as diverting resources from younger people. I would propose that we still haven't done much to prepare, possibly because as a culture we resent the time and money it would take to do so. Most financial programs are insufficient to meet the needs of older people who are not physically or financially independent, with the expectation that family members will provide the majority of care. This approach ignores the challenges of being a caregiver, and the experience of caregivers will be addressed in a later video. So look to the right side here, successful aging. The interpretation of this term usually means being physically and mentally fit into older age. There is the implication that if one just works hard enough, I added this bit, manages their finances responsibly, exercise, and have the right diet, they can, into their 70s, live as if they were still in their 40s. However, usually at some point they do experience some form of mental and physical decline, at which point they shift into the category of failing. And so the ageism might be held back as long as this person is still able to run around and pay for their own things. But what happens when they stop being able to do those things? So if we look to the left side here, so this is just my observations. Commercials selling vitamins or energy drinks to older people feature characters with boundless energy, running around after the grandkids, fashionable clothing, and large houses. And then skincare commercials usually have characters in their 20s and 30s, so people who don't need this stuff yet. Now, occasionally we'll have an A-list actress showing up, but even still, of course, they are made to look very young. Are we going to assume that using this skincare product will have us looking awesome into our 70s? There was this one commercial selling vitamins. I've only seen it once, but I found it very disturbing. It had this guy in a gym, and obviously he's meant to be older. He has gray hair, and he is beating a boxing bag, one of those big things. And it was clear from the context that this bag represented old age, and he was beating it, treating it like an enemy, and it creeped me right out. This is a report that you can find online. The link is in the description. It is from the federal, provincial, territorial ministers responsible for seniors. It came out in December 2023, and the report is called Consultations on the Social and Economic Impacts of Ageism in Canada, What We Heard Report. And there's actually a massive amount of material on different subjects in this report. I will be referring to it in other videos. I just want to go to one bit here. This is from page 13, so figure 2. Have you ever experienced ageism yourself? And of course, we have a very large number of people saying yes at a whopping 48.4%. So that's pretty horrible. But I also want to draw attention to those who are not sure that they've experienced ageism. So that's the gray, and 14% are not sure. So what does that mean? Did they have an encounter where they felt bad about it, but thought they were overreacting? Or do they not recognize the various kinds of ageism that's out there? So then we have figure 3. Have stereotypes or negative views about aging ever negatively influenced your perception of yourself? So at least we have a bit of a smaller number for the yeses at 40%, but we still have a number of people who are not sure at 10.5%. We're going to take a glance at the differences between direct discrimination and adverse effect discrimination. Direct discrimination. Now, nowadays, people aren't going to flat out say, I don't want to hire you because you're too old or something like that. But they can use phrasing that is meant to have like a chilling effect to discourage older people. So, in employment, it could involve an employer telling a candidate for a job that they have too much experience. Greater experience tends to indicate someone of greater age. Now, it also could mean that they anticipate an older worker will expect a higher wage, but unless you have that discussion, then it's pretty much discrimination. And then in rental accommodation, it could be a landlord describing the perfect tenant for their apartment, such as perfect for a young couple. If you were to look at, let's say, apartment ads, when it's a big company, they never refer to the tenants. They talk about the nature of the building, the services, and the cost, but they won't say anything about a tenant. Describing the tenant the person is looking for tends to be someone like renting out their basement apartment or whatever, and it can have a chilling effect. Oh, we want a young couple, so we don't want an older person. Couple, family status, and so on. So sometimes I've seen ads where I kind of want to contact the landlord and say, hey, are you aware that you have violated the Human Rights Code about 4 times in your ad? Adverse effect discrimination. Discrimination isn't intentional. Adverse effect discrimination can take place by creating an objective or neutral policy that has a significant negative impact on an individual or group according to a protected ground. For example, all employees must work 12-hour shifts. Well, are all employees capable of doing so? While there may be no intention to discriminate, it is impact, not intent, that matters. And then we have to think about, can any law be considered neutral or objective? Powerful people make these laws and make these policies, and usually the needs of individuals aren't high on their list of priorities. They're more interested in how the organization functions. Something to keep in mind. So this is from the Right at Home website. I've got the link in the description, and it's an article called Just Say No to Ageism, Including Your Own. It doesn't have a date. Internalized ageism happens when an older person accepts the negative stereotypes, biases, and discrimination about aging. Those common stereotypes affect their own thoughts, behaviors, self-esteem, and even actions. Internalized ageism can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, even limiting one's activities based on what one thinks an older person should do. So we have some ideas about what kind of physical activities older people should or should not be engaging in. Maybe you shouldn't go downhill skiing because if you fall and break something, you're in serious trouble. And of course, we endlessly hear discussion about older women not dressing as if they're younger women, that it's pathetic. So people internalize that idea and can act according to it. Older people may develop a negative view of their own aging process. They may think of themselves as less competent, attractive, or valuable compared to younger adults. This negative self-image can erode their self-esteem and lead to feelings of worthlessness or self-doubt. A possible scenario here, I've read some content where older employees might feel it's for the good of the organization if they move aside and let fresh blood come in. Lower confidence and fewer opportunities. Internalized ageism can undermine older people's confidence in pursuing new opportunities or challenges. They may doubt their abilities and skip chances for personal growth, career advancement, or simply trying new things. This can lead to social isolation and fewer life experiences. So we all know social isolation can be horrifically destructive to emotional and physical health, which can go unnoticed by others. If you want to get really depressed, look for videos about older people dying alone at home and not being discovered for weeks or longer. Believing in negative age-related stereotypes and thinking of oneself as old or frail can cause stress, anxiety, and depression. The psychological distress caused by internalized ageism may also affect one's physical health. For example, I am too old to go hiking or start running. Impact on seeking help. Internalized ageism may keep older people from seeking necessary support or healthcare services. They may downplay or dismiss their health concerns, believing that certain symptoms or conditions are inevitable consequences of aging. This can result in delayed diagnosis, untreated health conditions, or inadequate self-care. Now, that's the end of this video. As I mentioned, this is just a general look at the concepts of ageism. We're going to have videos for each different kind of ageism that's out there, and you might be surprised at how many different kinds there are. So thanks for getting to the end of this video. Have a great day.